Sit down and take a load off your feet.
Johnny Carson was a master of control. He knew exactly when to charm, when to deflect, and when to drop a joke so smoothly you barely felt the tension underneath. But every once in a while, a guest stepped onto The Tonight Show who simply refused to play along. And that's when things got interesting. Suddenly, the mood turned flirtatious, explosive, awkward, sometimes even risky for live TV, from glamorous icons who pushed Johnny to his limits to comedians and stars who quietly sparked real behind-the-scenes feuds. These appearances took on a life of their own. Today, we're revisiting the guests who made late-night history uncomfortable, unforgettable, and just a little bit controversial. Dolly Parton. In 1977, television audiences witnessed what would later be remembered as one of the most awkward and talked about late-night interviews of the era, when Dolly Parton appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. At the time, Carson was already more than a decade into his reign as the undisputed king of late night, while Dolly was still emerging as a national star, just beginning to cross from country music into mainstream fame. From the moment she stepped onto the stage and took her seat, it was clear that Carson's interest went beyond her chart success. His attention lingered, and the tone quickly drifted into flirtation. Dolly, long accustomed to being seen as both a songwriter and a sex symbol, seemed unfazed. She had learned early on how to navigate that kind of attention, and during that first appearance, she appeared more amused than offended. But that confidence hadn't always come easily. Earlier in her career, Dolly openly admitted that jokes about her body once bothered her deeply. When she was new to Nashville, she hadn't yet figured out how to respond or whether she even should. Over time, though, the jokes became unavoidable. They followed her from venue to venue, often coming from fellow performers she counted as friends. Eventually, she made a choice. Instead of letting the comments define her, she would define them herself. That shift became obvious during later appearances on Carson's show. In one memorable exchange, Carson wondered aloud whether people back home in Tennessee might describe her as healthy. Dolly instantly flipped the moment on its head, steering the conversation toward her famously curvy figure. With perfect comedic timing, she leaned into the joke, acknowledging what everyone was already thinking and beating Carson to the punch. When he tried to keep things polite, she went a step further, confirming that the rumors people whispered about her were, in fact, true. Carson, caught between professionalism and temptation, delivered the line that would echo for years, joking that he would gladly give up a year's salary just for a closer look. That playful, slightly dangerous energy became a recurring theme in their interviews. As the night went on, Carson pushed the humor further into adult territory, repeating his over-the-top offer. The audience roared with laughter, and Dolly laughed right along with them, hiding her face in mock embarrassment. To viewers, it looked like harmless fun, but there was also a genuine warmth beneath it all. That warmth became even more apparent when Dolly returned in 1979. This time, she revealed she had written a song just for Carson and casually mentioned that she considered him a good friend. Their rapport felt effortless, like two seasoned performers who instinctively knew how to play off one another. And in a twist no one expected, Carson nearly got the glimpse he had joked about for years, without paying a cent. During that same visit, Dolly shared a story about Carson stopping by to see her at precisely the wrong moment while she was backstage changing clothes. After all the teasing and exaggerated bravado, Carson was left momentarily speechless, unable to summon a single witty reply. By 1984, when Dolly returned to promote her film Rhinestone, the dynamic had come full circle. This time, Carson opened the interview with an apology. They had accidentally crossed paths backstage while he was fresh out of the shower, far less dressed than he would have liked. He explained that he rarely encountered guests before taping, and the timing couldn't have been worse, or better, depending on how you looked at it. Dolly, of course, saw the humor in it immediately. She joked that the experience made her understand exactly why someone might give up a year's salary for a closer encounter. Carson could only laugh and admit that he remembered the moment all too well. As the interview continued, the conversation drifted toward body types, specifically her rhinestone co-star Sylvester Stallone. When Carson asked what kind of build she found attractive in a man, Dolly brushed the question aside with her trademark charm. For her, looks came second to heart and personality, though she conceded that Stallone was certainly easy on the eyes. Then she turned her attention back to the stage, playfully praising Ed McMahon and teasing Carson by reminding him that, after their backstage encounter, she could personally vouch for his physique. The moment perfectly captured what made their exchanges so entertaining. Equal parts flirtation, humor, and mutual respect. Dolly has often said that she loved appearing on The Tonight Show because she enjoyed telling Johnny Carson little white lies. She delighted in playful exaggeration and harmless mischief, seeing it as a kind of social experiment. If the topic was serious, she was always honest, but when it came to banter, she liked to see how far she could stretch a story before someone caught on. Carson, more often than not, fell right into her traps, much to the audience's delight. Despite what viewers believed, Dolly later clarified that their relationship never extended beyond the studio. They liked each other, but they didn't socialize. Their entire connection lived at the desk, during commercial breaks, and under the bright lights of television. Once the cameras stopped rolling, so did the interaction. Because of their undeniable chemistry, many people assumed there was something more happening behind the scenes. Dolly was quick to shut that down. What audiences saw was not romance, but two professionals perfectly tuned into the rhythm of live television. Carson wasn't the only late-night host Dolly connected with. Over the years, she's admitted to having a soft spot for talk show personalities in general. More recently, she's joked about her fondness for Jimmy Fallon, calling him charming and funny, while reminding everyone that she knows better than to take a harmless crush too seriously. She said the chemistry comes naturally in that late-night space, where the mood is looser and people feel freer to be themselves. That atmosphere suited her perfectly. Whether it was Johnny Carson, David Letterman, or the hosts who came later, Dolly Parton seemed to thrive in that world. And time and again, it proved that late night loved her right back. Lucille Ball. Watching their old interviews, it becomes immediately clear that Lucille Ball and Johnny Carson shared a friendship built on razor-sharp wit and fearless teasing. One of the best examples came during her 1974 appearance on The Tonight Show. From the moment Lucy sat down, she went straight for him, joking that it was surprising to even see him there. Before Johnny could properly begin the interview, she cut in with a question that instantly set the tone for the night, whether he was still happy. Johnny hesitated, unsure where she was going with it, and asked what she meant. Lucy didn't miss a beat, casually pointing out that he had been married quite a few times. Johnny could only grin and acknowledge that she had come prepared to attack. At the time, he was on his third marriage, and he made sure to remind her of that fact. Lucy, of course, wasn't exactly new to marriage herself. She was happily married to Gary Morton, and while her legendary first marriage to Desi Arnaz looked magical on screen, it had been anything but easy behind the scenes. Because of that history, the moment eventually shifted from jokes to something more sincere. Lucy spoke warmly about the happiness she had found and genuinely wished the same for Johnny, telling him she hoped he would experience the kind of joy she had known for over a decade. Johnny remembered the moment she was referring to, but Lucy couldn't resist circling back with another jab, reminding him exactly when she had shared those words. The playful back and forth never slowed down. When Johnny mentioned that Lucy usually preferred not to talk before the show, she instantly corrected him, joking that she didn't like talking to him at any time. But when he brought up that she had once given him permission to ask her anything, she leaned right into the setup, turning the tables and asking whether there was anything about her that truly interested him. Johnny took the opening and posed what he called his one burning question, only for the moment to derail instantly. Lucy misheard him and thought he had asked her age. Her reaction was immediate and dramatic, jumping in disbelief as the audience erupted. Johnny scrambled to recover, insisting he would never ask such a thing and begging her to let him finish. When he finally got the question out, it was deliberately shocking, and the audience exploded. Lucy responded with pure instinct, freezing into one of her classic exaggerated expressions, then turning to give the same look to the camera at home. It was vintage Lucille Ball. Johnny admitted right then that this was exactly what he had been hoping for. He just wanted to see that famous reaction one more time. Lucy had no intention of actually answering the question, but she also wasn't truly offended. It was clear she understood the bit and the purpose behind it. Eventually, Johnny confessed that the question was never meant to be answered. It was simply a setup to trigger that iconic reaction audiences loved. Lucy agreed that it had worked perfectly, then ended the moment in true comedic fashion by pretending to fall asleep in her chair, smoothly dodging the subject altogether. Sophia Lauren. In 1979, Johnny Carson welcomed one of cinema's most glamorous icons, Sophia Lauren, to The Tonight Show. As he often did, Carson came prepared. He had just finished reading her autobiography and was clearly intrigued by one particular detail. Sophia believed strongly in good luck rituals and made sure to wear something red every single day, whether it was visible or not. Naturally, Johnny saw an opportunity. As soon as the interview began, he presented her with a small gift, explaining that after reading her book, he felt compelled to add to her lucky tradition. When Sophia opened the box, she found a bright red garter, and her surprise was unmistakable. Johnny explained that the gift might be a bit bold, but he had included a note saying it was simply meant as a backup, just in case she hadn't worn anything red that evening. The choice of a garter, of course, raised a few eyebrows and got an immediate reaction from the crowd. Sophia handled it with effortless charm. She asked whether she was expected to actually wear it. Johnny, clearly enjoying the moment, told her she didn't have to. That didn't stop her. She went ahead and slipped it on anyway, instantly sending the studio audience into a frenzy. But Sophia hadn't come unprepared either. After putting on the garter, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small red pouch. Inside was a lucky charm she had carried with her since their first interview together. She handed it to Johnny and asked him to keep it for good fortune. He gave it a curious sniff and joked about what might be inside, only to be relieved when she explained it was salt, a symbol of good luck in many cultures. Johnny laughed, noting that anything stronger might have caused them both a lot more trouble than they were ready for. As the interview continued, Sophia opened up in a way audiences didn't often see. She admitted that interviews usually made her uncomfortable. Johnny asked if that was the case with him as well, and she teased that it was, only because she hadn't mentioned him in her book. Johnny played along, calling it unfair, but graciously forgiving her on the spot. As the conversation went on, the mood softened, Sophia's nerves faded, and she told Johnny she trusted him completely and was genuinely enjoying their time together. At one point, she even hinted that she wouldn't mind getting to know him better beyond the show. Johnny, never missing a beat, flirted right back, keeping the exchange light and playful. Interestingly, neither of them brought up the first time they had ever met on television. Years earlier, in 1961, Sophia Lauren had appeared as the mystery guest on What's My Line, with Johnny Carson sitting on the panel. Back then, his boldest question to her had been a simple but daring one, asking if she was busy that night. It was a full-circle moment, unspoken but unmistakable, between two seasoned performers who understood exactly how to turn charm, humor, and timing into television magic. Madonna. By the time Madonna finally appeared on a late-night talk show in 1987, Johnny Carson was already nearing the end of his historic three-decade run as the face of The Tonight Show. Madonna later admitted that her choice was deliberate. If she was going to make her talk show debut, she wanted it to be with Johnny Carson. And true to form, she made sure no one would ever forget it. When Madonna walked onto the stage that night, she was dressed in exposed lingerie, a look that instantly caught both the audience's attention and Johnny's. Before he even introduced her, he turned to the crowd and admitted it had been an especially exciting day in the studio. Madonna leaned fully into the moment, teasing that if she was going to present herself as a virgin to anyone, it should be him. The audience erupted, while Johnny did his best to maintain composure. She followed it up by jokingly describing herself as a Midwestern girl wearing a bustier, poking fun at her upbringing and noting that her father had given her plenty of traditional values for her to rebel against. When Johnny asked about her husband at the time, Sean Penn, her response was brief and carefully chosen. She described him as interesting, leaving the rest to the imagination. One of the most unexpected moments came when a fly started circling Johnny's head mid-interview. Without hesitation, Madonna jumped up and swatted it out of the air with her bare hand, then casually blamed the attraction on the product in his hair. The spontaneity of the moment only added to the electricity in the room. As the conversation continued, Madonna talked about her busy schedule. She had just finished filming a movie and was preparing to head to Japan to launch her next tour. The segment wrapped with a clip from her latest film, Who's That Girl? But by then, the interview itself had already become the main event. The entire exchange played out like a perfectly balanced duel of charm and provocation. Johnny complimented her outfit, prompting Madonna to explain how involved she usually was in creating her look. While she worked closely with designers for tours and films, the outfit she wore that night wasn't custom-made at all. It was something she had simply picked up at a lingerie store. That revelation led Johnny into one of his classic moments of polite awkwardness. He carefully asked what someone would even call such an item if they wanted to buy it as a gift. Madonna answered effortlessly, clearly enjoying his discomfort. Johnny repeated the word slowly, amused by how refined it sounded, as the audience laughed along. Later, Johnny took a more reflective turn, thanking her for appearing and pointing out how rarely she did traditional television interviews. Outside of her own specials, the only other time he recalled seeing her was on Saturday Night Live, where he thought she had been terrific. Madonna casually mentioned that this technically wasn't her first talk show, which caught Johnny off guard. He immediately asked whether she felt uncomfortable in those environments. Her response was confident and provocative. She said she didn't feel uncomfortable at all. She had simply never thought much about doing a show like his until now. And if she was going to make a moment like this count, she wanted it to be with him. The audience loved it. Johnny, on the other hand, was visibly flustered. He joked about needing to run before things got any more dangerous. But Madonna wasn't finished. She leaned in one last time, teasing that she must be the first woman he had ever interviewed wearing a bustier. Johnny laughed, finally conceding that she was indeed the first, at least on television. Zsa Zsa Gabor. Beyond the well-documented on-air missteps and headline-grabbing moments already discussed, there is one story that continues to live on as late-night legend. It centers on the glamorous Zsa Zsa Gabor and an interview that may, or may not, have gone completely off the rails. According to the story, Zsa Zsa appeared on The Tonight Show with a small, fluffy pet in her arms. At some point during the conversation, she allegedly made a deliberately provocative remark to Johnny Carson, inviting him to pet something that could very easily be misunderstood. Without hesitation, Johnny is said to have fired back with a razor-sharp comeback, cleverly flipping the double meaning and pointing out that the animal would need to be moved first. Over the years, countless people have insisted the exchange never actually happened. Others are just as convinced it did. The rumor grew so persistent that even Jane Fonda brought it up directly during one of her own appearances, pressing Johnny to confirm or deny it. His response was simple and carefully neutral. He claimed he had no memory of such a moment ever taking place. Whether the story is pure myth or rooted in reality almost doesn't matter anymore. It feels believable precisely because it fits so neatly into Johnny Carson's public persona. He was known for walking a fine line, using sharp wit and timing to flirt with controversy, especially when bantering with glamorous female guests. True or not, the tale endures because Carson's 30-year reign on late-night television produced more than enough real moments that raised eyebrows and sparked conversation. Bob Hope. Johnny Carson sat behind that familiar desk for 30 years, hosting The Tonight Show from 1962 to 1992. Over those 3 decades, nearly everyone who mattered in entertainment passed through his studio. For young comedians, a few minutes on Johnny's couch could change everything. It was often the moment their careers truly began, launching names like Jerry Seinfeld and Joan Rivers into the mainstream almost overnight. At the same time, Johnny regularly welcomed the biggest stars in the business. Icons like Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope were frequent guests, and by that stage, Carson himself had become one of the most valuable figures NBC had ever had. Still, there was one man he could never quite outrank within the network. Bob Hope always seemed to be a step ahead. At NBC, Hope held a unique kind of power. He even used the same stage where The Tonight Show was filmed, and it was widely understood that if he wanted airtime, he got it. If Bob had a new special to promote, he would request an appearance, and Johnny, whether he liked it or not, would agree. To viewers at home, the pairing looked natural. The two comedy giants appeared friendly and relaxed together, but behind the scenes, the reality was very different. Over time, it became clear that the chemistry audiences saw on screen didn't reflect how Johnny actually felt. Off camera, Johnny reportedly couldn't stand Bob Hope. He continued booking him not out of admiration, but because he felt trapped by Hope's status. As the years went on, that resentment only grew. By the time Johnny retired in 1992, he is said to have considered Bob Hope his least favorite guest in the show's long history. The core of the tension came down to comedy style. Johnny thrived on improvisation. He loved quick exchanges, unexpected turns, and spontaneous moments that couldn't be planned. Bob Hope, despite his legendary reputation, was the complete opposite. He relied entirely on scripted material and depended heavily on his writers for every laugh. Even in his prime, Bob struggled without a script. As he aged, that dependence became impossible to ignore. He often needed his writers not just for jokes, but to help him follow the flow of the conversation itself. For a host like Johnny, who lived for sharp, unscripted moments, it was frustrating to watch. While Johnny chose to step away as his health began to decline, Bob pushed on, continuing to perform long after his timing and instincts had faded. Johnny eventually came to see him not just as a difficult guest, but as a bad one. Still, he kept inviting him back, largely because saying no to Bob Hope felt unthinkable at NBC. Johnny and his staff grew increasingly irritated by how rigid Bob's appearances were. Many of his supposed surprise walk-ons were carefully planned and anything but spontaneous. The routine was usually the same. Bob would deliver a string of pre-written jokes, then roll a clip from his latest special. Those clips were another sore point. Bob often promised they would be short, but they almost always ran much longer than agreed. What was supposed to be a brief segment would stretch on, throwing off the show's pacing and adding to Johnny's growing frustration. One story from the studio perfectly captures the dynamic. During a particularly strong monologue, the audience was roaring with laughter. Bob reportedly turned to Johnny and asked if he could use that laughter as a track for his own upcoming special. Johnny agreed, but the request left him stunned by how bold Bob could be. As Bob's health declined, his appearances became even harder to manage. Improvisation was no longer an option at all. According to Johnny, if the conversation drifted even slightly from the script, Bob would be completely lost. If Johnny accidentally read the wrong question, Bob would respond with an answer meant for an entirely different one. Oblivious to the mismatch, watching Bob struggle left a lasting impression on Johnny. It became one of the reasons he chose to walk away before his own abilities faded. There's a well-known backstage story that after one of Bob's later visits, Johnny turned to his crew and made it clear he never wanted to end up that way himself. Joan Rivers. Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers would eventually become the center of one of the most talked-about feuds in late-night television history. But it didn't start that way at all. In the beginning, their relationship looked like a perfect success story. Joan Rivers got her big break on The Tonight Show, and from her very first appearance, the chemistry between her and Carson was undeniable. The audience loved her instantly, and Johnny saw it right away. After that debut, he predicted she was going to be a major star. He wasn't wrong. Joan's career took off, and she quickly became one of the show's most dependable guests. Over time, Joan became more than just a frequent visitor. Whenever Johnny was away or feeling unwell, she was the first person NBC called to fill in behind the desk. To viewers, it looked like a sign of trust and closeness, almost as if she were being groomed as part of the Tonight Show family. But behind the scenes, the reality was much colder. Despite their easy rapport on camera, Johnny never developed a real friendship with Joan once the lights went out. He viewed her less as a confidant and more as a valuable part of the show's machinery. Their bond existed strictly within the boundaries of the studio. That unspoken divide became painfully clear in the 1980s when Joan landed her own late-night talk show. Instead of celebrating her success, Johnny took it personally. According to Joan, the reason cut deeper than competition. She believed that Johnny felt a sense of ownership over her career, and that because she was a woman, he never imagined she would step out from under his shadow. At the time, Joan openly struggled to make sense of his reaction. She admitted that her interpretation sounded extreme, but nothing else explained the intensity of his response. For years, she wondered whether he had simply valued her more than other comics, only to feel betrayed when she made an independent move. As she reflected on it later, Joan came to believe that Johnny's attitude was rooted in control. In her mind, a male comedian making the same choice would have been seen as acting in his own best interest, but a woman doing it was treated as disloyal. She felt that Johnny couldn't accept the idea that she, as a woman, would directly compete with him. The situation only grew worse as the media took sides. Johnny told reporters that Joan had failed to reach out and painted her actions as hurtful and disrespectful. Joan was deeply affected by this, insisting it simply wasn't true. What hurt most was feeling powerless while false versions of the story were printed as fact, with no way to correct them. Although Joan eventually rebuilt her career and found success in daytime television, the damage in late night was permanent. She was effectively shut out of The Tonight Show for decades. Even after Johnny retired, the ban remained in place. Jay Leno, who succeeded Carson, refused to book her out of loyalty to Johnny, keeping the door firmly closed. In Hollywood, feuds often soften with time, especially as people grow older. But that reconciliation never came for Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers. Johnny passed away without the two ever making peace. After his death, Joan didn't soften her view. She continued to speak openly about the feud, making it clear that she saw Johnny as her professional mentor, who had, in her eyes, behaved unprofessionally by allowing such a bitter conflict to take hold. By the end of his life, she felt the damage had gone too far. Whatever admiration she once had for him was gone, replaced by disappointment over a rivalry she believed never should have existed in the first place.